Welcome back. It was nice to see all of you in person yesterday. This is virtual, not quite as intimate, but wonderful to have all of you with us for this next part of the program that I know is of particular interest because it's the what happens next set of questions. Graduate school, professional school, what makes the most sense, when, how do I afford it, how do I balance all of these goals? So we've got three terrific panelists who are going to help share their experience, their wisdom, and their insights with all of you. Before I do that, introduce the three of them, let me just take a second on behalf of all of you to express our thanks to my colleagues, Ann Wise and Delaney Boyd, all of my colleagues who played a role in KIPS, but Ann and Delaney, who've been working on all of this for such commitment and such dedication. And all of you who were selected should have a sense of how excited they were in reaching out to all of you and bringing you here. So my thanks to both of them for a terrific program that continues through today. So our plan is that I will introduce each of the three speakers in the order in which they will speak, and then I will turn the program over to them. You send in your questions and they'll get texted to me, and then we'll call on the person who's going to ask questions. So that's how we'll run the question and answer session. But we'll do all three speakers first. So jot down your notes on questions you want to ask, just as we did last night. We'll do all of the speakers, and then we'll go forward to the question and answer. So let me turn to the introduction of our three terrific panelists. Our first is Angel Wright-Lanier, Executive Director of the Network of Schools of Public Policy Affairs and Administration, NASPAA. NASPAA is a membership organization with over 300 schools at United States and international universities that award degrees in public administration, public policy, public affairs, nonprofit, and related fields. It's recognized as the global creditor of master's degrees programs in all of these. Dr. Wright-Lanier brings a collaborative and a practical approach to her role based on an extensive career in local government service in North Carolina. She has managed 20 different city and county departments in 4 municipalities, developing extensive expertise in intergovernmental relations. Her career also reflects a commitment to academic excellence, not surprisingly. She pursued a liberal arts and sciences undergraduate education herself, earning a bachelor's in history from University of Tennessee at Knoxville. And then she continued her education with a master's degree in public administration from University of Tennessee at Chattanooga, and a second master's degree in management information systems, and a doctor of education from Vanderbilt's Peabody College with a concentration in leadership and learning. With a passion for developing the next generation of public servants, she will share with you some reflections on graduate MPA programs. Dr. Wright-Lanier, thank you so much for being with us today.
Most certainly. Thank you for that introduction, and thank you for having me. I'm going to just talk a little bit. I'm going to give you a small summary, and then there were some questions that were presented to me. I'm going to actually walk through those, and then I'll definitely take the opportunity to answer any questions at the end. So just going to jump in. So the best way to learn about the admissions process of the graduate programs you're interested in is by asking the right questions. The best way to get accepted into target programs is by showing the application's review committee why you merit an investment by their school. How can you show that you committed to public service? What have you or what will you do to impact the world positively? By detailing your commitment to public service, and by the review committee seeing how you're going to make a positive impact on public service, you can help schools to know that you are worth investing in, not only for the school's sake, but for the sake of the people and governments that will depend on you when you graduate. But that's not all there is. As you prepare for the admissions process, I want to tell you a few things you can and ways that you can approach this challenge and prepare you with the proper tools. So one of the first questions I was asked was, when reviewing MPA program applications, how do admissions committees weigh GRE scores versus public service experience? So the importance of GRE scores will vary from program to program. Some schools weigh them very highly when reviewing your application, while others only listed it as optional, and some of them do not even accept them anymore. So public service programs are primarily looking for public service dedication and experience. What we like to say and think is that you are more than your GRE score. So the main question is, are you well suited for a public service role? That is precisely what the admissions department wants to know first and foremost. So remember that you should never have your scores sent directly to your schools of interest from the GRE test facility. See your scores first and then think if or when and to whom you want to share them. So if the program does not require GRE scores and your scores aren't good, or as not good as you want them to be, there's no reason to send them, because the old saying goes, once you see them, you can't unsee them. So that's a tip for you there. The only way to know how a program will weigh your GRE scores is by asking the question. You should find that most programs aim to be as transparent as possible regarding the admissions process. So it's in your best interest. It's in their best interest as well as yours. So remember, what matters more than anything else is how you merit an opportunity to continue or contribute to public service. The second question that I want to address is, how does financial aid differ between undergraduate and graduate school? So financial aid differs between the two undergraduate and graduate programs. Students should become informed about the student's financial aid process or the school's financial aid processes when researching the school's websites and by asking the admissions department. But there are a few differences and I'll outline them. So first, there are fewer financing tools at the graduate level. So the goal is that you should use all of those tools. Then secondly, there's no such thing as need-based aid at the graduate level. Essentially, the way we look at it is everyone needs money for school. So for instance, securing federal loans is not need-based at all. It's usually just a credit check. So when you argue that you need money for school, you should instead state your merit for the program. You're asking the school, as I said earlier, to invest in you because of how you have or how you will contribute to public service. So admissions professionals are not necessarily qualified to determine who needs more money. Lastly, you must learn as much as possible by researching the programs and asking the right questions. So learn everything you need to know about each program's expectations, financing tools, operations, and perhaps most importantly, their timelines and deadlines. It's important to start asking these questions as early as possible. You don't want to wait. You want to be proactive and not miss your window. A third question that was presented was, what does the typical application process and timeline look like? As a reminder, schools have just as much interest in a smooth and transparent admissions process as you do. But that doesn't mean that they're going to, hand deliver you the information you need unprompted. So often it will be on you to reach out to the admissions department, to ask the questions, and to see what help and guidance the admissions folks can provide you with. Another question is whether or not applicants should enter the workforce before getting a graduate degree. So this will definitely be up to you and your choice, but your professional workforce experience is another essential detail for school admissions department to consider and to ask. So some schools may require a highly desire professional or volunteer public service work experience on your application. Some schools, like American University in DC, bundle work experience into their education requirements. They require you and support you and your involvement in public sector and NGO internships, non-governmental organization, I should say. For each school, the question of your work experience will vary based on their academic design. Professional work experience never hurts. It's a great way to advance your professional maturity. So for instance, if, between undergrad and grad school, if you want to do Teach for America or AmeriCorps, there are great opportunities for you all to develop more professional skills. Where can one find scholarships? And, if you're writing things down, I'd like for you, and you may already know about these, but I want to just make sure. If you're planning to seek out financial support for scholarships, it's essential that you start your search early as possible and that you look often. There's a site called My Scholly, SCHOLLY. It's excellent. It's specifically designed scholarship resource, but you can't go wrong with Google either. You just definitely want to check that out often as well. There's something else called Scholarship Universe. It's another popular tool that is a research of choice for one of our schools at the Ohio State University, John Glenn College of Public Affairs, where all admitted students at John Glenn are eligible for scholarships ranging from anywhere from $1,000 to $12,000 annually. It is important to note that unlike undergraduate scholarships, graduate level funding is not or does not automatically renew. So be sure to ask the questions about the timing of each scholarship offering so you understand how it works and what to expect before you make any final decisions. And then the question came up as to whether or not students should work full-time while pursuing their graduate degree. Like a program's expectations and requirements for pre-program work experience, the expectation for your time spent working during your program will vary from school to school. This is another great reminder to do the research and ask the question so you can take ownership and have agency over your level of preparation. American University, for example, includes work experience gathering during your program as part of their academic design. Ohio State, on the other hand, does not require it as part of their design. So do your research, as I said, and ask the questions. And then this is another question that I received. So how does a low-income first-generation student make graduate school affordable? And to what extent is each graduate school's level necessary for various careers? None of the information that I'm about to share should deter you, but these are the tools that you'll need to be successful in your applications. Remember that MPAs, Masters of Public Administrations or Masters of Public Policy, are widely considered to be substantial investments. Advanced degrees are often necessary, not just for finding a job, but finding a meaningful and impactful career. So you may want to realize this, or you may not realize this, but you have more leverage than you realize when applying to schools. Always remember to engage the admissions department and ask questions. Your target schools will want to set you up with tools that you'll need to be successful. So keep in mind the main questions for you will be, what is your merit? Why are you a strong candidate? And what makes you unique? The investment of time and energy will help you find the success you want after graduation. For one example, so the Ohio State University MPA graduates, the average employment is 85 to 95% in their field of choice within 6 months of graduation. So their graduates also tend to graduate with a lower level of debt because I just talked to you about the fact that they give or try to give everyone anywhere from $1,000 to $12,000 scholarship. And I want to say something personally about this. As someone who, I was always middle class, but my mother made too much money for me to get a Pell Grant or get any kind of need-based funding. So I had to, work 2 jobs. I had to take student loans. If I hadn't done those things and made the investment in myself, I can tell you, I would not have been the deputy town manager, assistant city manager in several cities that I have worked in throughout North Carolina. So being willing to make that investment is very important. Having graduated from a poorly resourced high school in the poorest county in the state of North Carolina, I would certainly not be talking to you had I not made those investments in myself. And finally, the last thing I want to talk to you about is about a distinction with the international experience or international applicants. So international applicants should be careful to allow time to complete their applications because admissions committees may need more time to review them. So they have to look at things about, like you're vetting your GPA and other materials to see how credits align. So the best thing for the applicant to do is to contact the school well ahead of time and to ask those questions. There are often challenges with visas, and that's one of the things at NASPAA we have on our federal legislative agenda to work with the State Department to try to reduce the amount of time that it takes to get our international students on board. And finally, to wrap up, as someone who has spent much of their life as a public servant, I want to share that public service is a very noble profession. Even in spite of what you see or may see on television, it is still a very noble profession. And we need people like you to impact the community around us and to enter our programs. So many opportunities do await you after you graduate from undergraduate and graduate school. So I hope this was helpful for you, and I look forward to your questions at the end of the conversations. Thank you all.
Thank you so much. So we now transition from the policy arena to the science arena. You know, we talk about the liberal arts and sciences, and I like to remind our Phi Beta Kappa members that we say liberal arts and sciences to recall that the sciences are part of what we talk about in the liberal arts. But in fact, that would have struck the ancient Greeks as an odd thing to say, because they knew that the sciences were a deep part of the liberal arts, math and biology, chemistry, physics, astronomy. So in a sense, it's a small transition to widen the lens to the sciences. But I think as our next speaker is going to tell us, it's an even smaller transition from policy to science, given his distinguished career. Dr. Anand Parekh is the Chief Medical Advisor at the Bipartisan Policy Center, BPC, where he provides clinical and public health expertise across the organization. He has led specific efforts tackling such significant policy issues as COVID-19, public health, opioid crisis, obesity, health and housing, domestic and global HIV/AIDS, business and public health collaboration, emergency preparedness, social isolation, rural health, and prescription drug costs. Truly an astonishing range of social issues that implicate policy, science, but also the hard sciences. Prior to joining BBC, he completed a decade of service at the United States Department of Health and Human Services, HHS. He was an HHS Deputy Assistant Secretary for Health in the Senior Executive Service. He developed and implemented national initiatives focused on prevention, wellness, and care management, and received the Surgeon General's Outstanding Service Award for all of his extraordinary efforts. He is a native of Michigan, and I think I can say a proud Michigander, and in fact, a proud University of Michigan graduate with 3 degrees. Go Blue. A BA in political science, Phi Beta Kappa. We're proud to claim him as one of our own. An MD and a Master's in Public Health, MPH in Health Management and Policy. He is a fellow of the American College of Physicians, an adjunct professor of health management and policy at the University of Michigan School of Public Health, and an adjunct assistant professor of medicine at Johns Hopkins University. He's the author of Prevention First, Policymaking for a Healthy America. He will draw on his expertise to provide tips and suggestions, particularly for students applying to MD, MPH programs with an interest in policy. Dr. Parekh, thank you for joining us today and for speaking with our KIPP scholarship students.
Secretary Lawrence, thanks so much for that gracious introduction. It's great to be with all of you. Great to be with Angela and Katie, and thanks to the team and staff for organizing this. And really thank you to all the students here. You know, it's wonderful to read about your work and accomplishments, and you have such a bright future ahead of you. And however we can all help you, I think we stand ready and willing. So what I thought I'd do is just for a couple of minutes tell you about my story, and hopefully that will then lead to, Angela gave so much practical advice, and hopefully I can leave you with a couple of tidbits at the end as well. And then I'm really looking forward to hearing your questions. I'm going to concentrate on health, of course, but hopefully sort of recounting my steps will you know, help you as you think about your next steps right now as well as in the future. So I was always interested in an early age on issues related to government and current affairs and history. That was really my interest in elementary school and high school. But I also came from a family, sort of a tradition of a lot of healthcare professionals, a lot of physicians in the family. And so it was sort of not, you know, there wasn't really pressure, but having so many clinicians in the family, you sort of felt like, all right, I got to be a doctor like everyone else. And so sort of going through high school, I didn't quite know exactly how to reconcile these interests, but that was sort of a theme of my childhood as well as sort of adolescence of exactly how do I do this. And so I, as Secretary Lawrence mentioned, enrolled at the University of Michigan because they had an integrated medical program at the time where out of high school, they accepted students not only in the undergraduate literature and science and arts program, but also at the medical school. Granted, of course, you had to keep your grades up and pass what's called the MCAT for medical school. But what that did for me is allow me to have that flexibility to hone in on my interests, which were in history and political science. And in fact, I was a political science major in college, and not to say that I wouldn't have been able to do that without being in the program, but that allowed me the flexibility to focus on domestic policy related issues, international relations. I spent a semester at Oxford. So I spent the first couple of years of college really focused in that area. I graduated early and then had a year until my medical school class was supposed to start. And so I ended up applying to graduate school, specifically the School of Public Health at the University of Michigan, thinking that that might bridge my interests in sort of government and policy and bigger health-related issues as well as medicine. And that was just a great year for me between my undergraduate time as well as my medical school time. To learn about many of the big issues impacting health in this country, both on the public health side and the healthcare side, really learning hard sciences like epidemiology and biostatistics, but then also learning about issues related to healthcare law and administration and public policy. And so I spent a full year engrossed at the School of Public Health there as a graduate student. And then matriculated on to medical school where I spent 4 years there. Probably the only downside of when I did my graduate training in public health was the fact that I learned all of this wonderful information, but then really couldn't go and apply it because then I was really focused in on my medical school training. That being said, during medical school, I found every opportunity whenever I could to get to Washington, D.C., to engage in policy, worked at the Institute of Medicine, worked on the Hill. So always sort of try to keep one foot in that corner. But ultimately graduated after 8 years with my undergraduate degree, my graduate degree in public health, as well as my medical school degree. And then again, not knowing exactly how I would converge on both of these interests, went in to pursue what's called a residency, an internal medicine residency. In my case, at Johns Hopkins University here, again, the proximity to DC was attractive, and then the training at Hopkins. And then again, really focused in on my medical training, not quite sure how I was going to utilize that graduate school public health education that I had. Once again, spent some time on the Hill. Every time I had an elective, I was, trying to spend time in the executive branch and legislative branch. And then ultimately had to make a choice during my residency training, how much do I actually want to practice? And I really enjoyed seeing patients, and how much did I want to really get up every morning and try to think about some of these bigger pictures in terms of improving health in this country. And made the decision after my training that even though I'll spend some time seeing patients on the side, that what I really wanted to do, what was really getting me up in the morning, was work in policy. Not that I exactly knew what that meant at that time early in my career. And so sort of a really funny story of how I got involved in policy. After my 3 years of training, I talked to as many people as I could. I was close to DC. Government was sort of enamored with government. Ended up talking to the science advisor for the HHS secretary at the time, and told him about my interest in bread and butter healthcare and public health related issues, cost, access, quality. Asked him for some thoughts on opportunities, which he did give me. And then he asked me the question, well, why don't you come work for me? And I said, okay, well, what is it that you focus on? And now this is sort of post 9/11, so 2005, post 9/11 in the public health space, bioterrorism was sort of a critical issue. There was something brewing in Southeast Asia which is also currently the talk of the emergency preparedness world here in this country, H5N1 avian influenza, which had a mortality rate about 50% at that time. And so he started talking about his work in identifying modalities of mass prophylaxis. So in the event, for example, of a bioterror event, how do you quickly get life-saving medications to a population at risk? How do we prepare for a pandemic influenza? I heard him out, and very naively, after he sort of talked about all of this, I said, well, that's really all really interesting, but that's not why I'm leaving sort of clinical medicine and why I'm leaving, being a physician. I think I'm interested in more broader issues. And he was so nice. He said, all right, fair enough. And he sent me on my way, talked to all the leads that he suggested. And sure enough, 3 months later, I went back to him and I said, I haven't really gotten anywhere, but I'm graduating. Remember that job you were offering me? Maybe I'll take it. And that's really how I started my public service career in government, working in emergency preparedness, bioterrorism preparedness, pandemic influenza preparedness. And that was sort of the best decision I made early on in my career, because number one, he ended up being a terrific mentor. Number two, it was such an important salient issue at that time in the public health world. And I learned so much about public service, ended up staying at Health and Human Services, as Secretary Lawrence said, for about 10 years. And then came to the organization where I am now, the Bipartisan Policy Center, founded by 4 former Senate Majority Leaders, to try to take the best ideas from both sides to promote health security and opportunity. I will say that we are the only organization in Washington, D.C. left still with the word bipartisan in our title. So it sort of tells you a little bit about the times. I'll tell you, it's a bit lonely waving the bipartisan flag in an election year, but being very mission driven, we think it's important work that we do. We think it's valuable to the American public. And so I've been there for nearly 10 years now. And so that very quick sort of summary of my career sort of brings me to some of the maybe tidbits that I want to start you off with. And then again, I would love to, during the Q&A, we would love to engage in sort of broader discussion and answer your questions. But, I've always felt that health provides the foundation and education provides the acceleration for all of us to achieve our life goals. And for those of you who are interested in health careers, I think there are a couple of things you can take away from my path. The first thing is there is no one right path. So I encourage you to talk to as many people as you can in the health field, if that's what you're interested in the public service field. And what you'll find is that you talk to 10 people, you'll get 10 different paths. And ultimately, what is right, the right path is what is right for you. And that may be different for other people. There isn't one degree that you have to have. If you want to have a career in health, you don't have to have a master's in public health. You don't have to have a medical degree. These are all helpful degrees, useful degrees, but there are no must-haves. So again, there's no one right path. I think that's sort of the first tidbit. The second is it's really helpful, if you're interested in health, to understand the bigger picture of where are we in this country. Just coming out of COVID, where there's tremendous misinformation, disinformation, but understanding even broader than COVID, that we are a country that where you can obtain exceptional healthcare services, but yet we're also a country that spends twice as much as any other industrialized country on health for not necessarily better outcomes. We're a country that has a huge preventable health burden, a country where there are still tremendous disparities, whether it's racial, ethnic, geographic, a country from a workforce perspective, for those of you who are thinking about health careers, where we have incredible workforce gaps when it comes to public health, primary care. So sort of understanding sort of the big picture of where you're getting to, even if you're ultimately interested in sort of a sliver of that, I think is really important. So you're grounded and you understand where the possibilities of where your career could go. The third is, I think, based on my quick description of what I went through, you don't have to have everything figured out on day one or at the beginning. I mean, clearly, I spent sort of the first 25 years of my life trying to figure out how am I going to balance and mix political science and government and policy with the doctor-patient relationship and patient care. I didn't have everything figured out, and I certainly am still sort of learning, and trying to figure out when I grow up, what is it that I want to do? So you don't have to put undue pressure on yourself to have everything figured out sort of on day one. The fourth is, there's sort of this misconception that there's a perfect job out there. There's really no perfect job. And I don't think that you ought to go into your career thinking, all right, well, this is the perfect job, and how do I get there? For example, again, I told you about my first job. It was something that I hadn't really intended, right? But it ended up being an opportunity that was really, really instrumental in my growth and in my career, having a mentor, focusing on areas that are salient at the time. And there's so much value in that. I didn't think going in that was going to be the case, but learning from every experience you have, I think it's so important. And then finally, I'll just sort of end on, again, health careers, but public service, and where those Venn diagrams meet. And we really need as many people going into public service as possible. And certainly, when you talk about debt and issues, there are certain challenges there. But I do think that it is so important today's day and age that we have people who are passionate about and motivated by public service. Having that graduate degree, I think, can only help. Not only does it give you that valuable education, it also gives you something to fall back upon if once you leave public service. And most people in public service don't spend their whole career in public service. Many do, but many don't as well. There are also, again, careers that are in the middle of that Venn diagram of public service as well as health. I'll give you one example, something at Health and Human Services called the U.S. Public Health Service Commission Corps. So out of our 70,000 employees, about 10% were in something called the U.S. Public Health Service Commission Corps. It's one of the uniform branches of government. It's one of the non-military branches, but these are individuals who are health professionals who have agreed to serve in government, and they serve in various scientific agencies of health and human services. They are also the individuals, whenever there's a national public health emergency, who are called upon and deployed to areas of need. So whether it's a natural disaster or some sort of man-made emergency. And these are people who devote their career, again, not only to health, but also to public service. And there are multiple opportunities like that as well at different parts of your career, whether that's early or mid-level. And so, again, this sort of combination of both health as well as public service, you can have great careers in doing both. So those are just a few initial thoughts, maybe to get us started on the health side. And again, really looking forward to your specific questions and engaging in a discussion, but hope this was helpful, and I'll turn it over back to you, Secretary.
Thank you. Wonderful and inspiring thoughts from both of our first two speakers, and I know our third speaker will pick up right from that point. I can't deny that the subject of law school is one near and dear to my heart as a former law school dean, and actually someone who still teaches at a law school. When I was a law school dean, we used to refer to the admissions department as the Department of Oxygen. The admissions group is the group that not only brings us new students, but the admissions group is also, in many ways, the public face of the institution, describing what it is, what it does, what its possibilities are, and what roads can go from it. So we're very fortunate to have with us today Katie Delsandro, who is the Director of Admissions at the University of Virginia School of Law. In that position, she helps the UVA Law Admissions Dean, Natalie Blazer, narrow down the literally thousands of applicants for Virginia Law School to form a class of about 300 students. She came to UVA after serving as Associate Director in the Office of Equal Opportunity and Affirmative Action at Columbia University. Previously, she served as an attorney in the U.S. Department of Commerce in the Office of the General Counsel and in its Employment and Labor Law Division. She was also an associate here in Washington, D.C. at the law firm of Paul Hastings. She earned her undergraduate degree in history at Wake Forest University and her law degree at, not surprisingly, the University of Virginia. As a law student, she served on the editorial board of the Journal of Law and Politics. as Public Service Committee Chair for the Student Bar Association and as Director of the Libel Show. I got to admit, that's in that one's got an intrigue that maybe we'll have time to get some questions on. I will just tell you as an aside, Katie, that I always did a Law Dean's skit in the Legal Follies show on the theory that if I parodied myself, they would leave me alone. And it usually worked reasonably well. She will share tips and perspectives on applying to law school with a public interest career in mind. We're delighted to have you with us here today.
Very, very happy to be here, and thank you for that lovely introduction. So I'm going to start us off here, I think, with kind of a threshold question, which is basically, what is law school and who should be thinking about it? At the end of the day, I think of law school as a trade school for people who want to become lawyers, which means that whatever mission it is, whatever public service angle you have in your life, that you want to use the laws of this country or international laws as a means to accomplish whatever that goal is. I saw this question pop up earlier, so I will address it head on. Do I think people who don't want to be lawyers should go to law school? No, I don't. Now look, will every person who graduates from law school go on to become a lawyer? No, some people will find other paths, but I think at least at this point, when you're contemplating it, at the point at which you are applying, you should be thinking that a career as a lawyer is a good choice for you. And the reason that I say that is, I think anybody who has spent much time talking to lawyers and have talked to lawyers and told them that they're thinking about law school will hear, don't do it, don't do it. And I have a theory that those lawyers are people who didn't want to be lawyers, right? They went to law school for reasons related to kind of interest or thinking it was going to be more of a generalist degree. That was going to open up a bunch of doors for them. And at the end of the day, that may be the case. But you should really be thinking of this as a path to become a lawyer. This is 3 years of your life. This is 3 very productive years of your life that you will be giving to this endeavor. It is a very expensive endeavor. The full cost, for example, for this year to go to UVA, including cost of living, is in the 6 figures, right? So this is something that you should be feeling really confident that this is the right path for you, and you should have a very good reason for following this path. And people who have put that kind of thought into this, going into it, it reads in their application. It's a better application, right? And so all of that will come together. And until that point, when you can kind of look at yourself in the mirror and say, I want to do this, I want to be a lawyer, you shouldn't be applying to law school. So that's kind of the threshold there. As I said, law school for the vast majority of programs is a 3-year program, although there are law schools that do offer part-time and night programs. So that could be an option for you at some point in your career. Most law schools teach in a combination of classroom experiences and experiential learning experiences. So those classroom experiences are going to be probably like you've seen in movies, right? The Socratic method, faculty asking broad questions and calling upon students to answer them, and kind of flesh out ideas in the context of a big classroom activity. Or, you have seminars where you're sitting around a smaller table, and you're doing more reading and more writing, and you're having more personal discussions with faculty as you kind of narrow in on the things that you're interested in. And then you combine that with, as I said, experiential learning. And so that is where you get to take all of these big ideas of the things you have been learning and the concepts of law school, and you get to bring them down to earth and figure out how you're actually going to apply them in a real world setting. And so, I think that is particularly beneficial for students who are going into public service, because, your learning curve once you get on the job is going to be a lot shorter. They're going to expect you to hit the ground running. And so being able to participate in clinics where you are, defending indigent criminal defendants, or you are representing the rights of employees who have experienced hardship, or you're working directly with healthcare policies, or things like that are going to give you a leg up, not only in your understanding of how the law actually works, but also as a resume builder. Similarly, externship programs, study abroad programs. To me, they're an essential component of a legal education, because if you leave law school only understanding how to think about the law, but you have no idea how to apply it, you're missing the main piece of what's going to make you a lawyer and what's going to constitute the bulk of your career, but probably. And so, when you're thinking about law schools, if you're looking at what different law schools are offering, ideally you want to see a mix of both of those things. Many law schools also offer dual degree programs. Again, my advice for this is, and UVA offers 14 of them. We have them. My advice though is enter into a dual degree program if you have a good reason for wanting that second degree. I just cannot in good conscience encourage people to accumulate degrees that don't have an intended purpose. But there are many dual degree programs that do have very valid intended purposes. And so a lot of this is going to be incumbent upon you and your goals to figure out, what kind of qualifications you really do need to do the things that you want to do, and then target your efforts to those things. Financing, as I said earlier, law school is expensive, and adding on more degrees is going to make it more so. Angel mentioned earlier, your options for funding at the graduate level are a lot more narrow than they are in the undergrad level. It's just fewer options. The schools have fewer options to work with. Our students, most of them do take out some sort of federal-based loans. Although I will, because I think this was one of the questions for me, I will asterisk that international students, so non-US citizens, don't take out US federal loans. You will have to supplement your education through other means. And that is a whole conversation on its own. Truly financing law school is probably a session all on its own. Aside from that, most schools offer merit-based scholarships, which are largely distributed at the application and admission phase. Some schools do offer need-based scholarships as well. Private scholarships exist. And for those of you, which I think is probably most of you who are going into public service, you will find that many law schools offer loan forgiveness programs for students who are going into service careers. And so essentially what that means is, you will have borrowed and, incurred debt to pay for your law school application, but your school, or depending on what state you're in, possibly the state, maybe the federal government will repay portions of those loans. UVA happens to have, I think, a very generous loan forgiveness program. If you are making $85,000 or less coming out of law school, UVA is paying your loans 100%. And then there's kind of a proration up to $100,000 a year. And so the goal of those programs is to kind of look realistically at law school financing and say, okay, we can't get around the fact that law school is expensive, but we don't want the fact that law school is expensive to prevent people from going into public service careers. So for you at this stage, and as you're considering which law schools to go to, those loan forgiveness programs should be really at the forefront of your mind when you're looking at your financial aid packages, because while those loan numbers can look really scary on their face, they may not be amounts that you fully end up paying back yourself. The other piece to the financing that I will say, because I have experienced this myself, and I will tell you, I am a first-generation graduate student. I went to undergrad on Pell Grants. I understand that, not everybody has the same cushions that everybody else has to take on financial risk. Careers evolve, and you can make a lot of money right out of the gate as a lawyer if you're going to go into a law firm or something like that for a time, and then pivot your career into public service. That is a well-worn path for many UVA law graduates, for many lawyers out there. A lot of law firms will allow you to gain public service careers through doing pro bono work and things like that. And so, if you are looking to gain legal skills and, pay down some debt or build yourself a financial cushion to make a pivot later, that's okay, right? Your first job out of law school doesn't have to be your whole career. So who should go to law school? I would say the main things that lawyers do are reading, writing, research. I think sometimes there's a misunderstanding based on kind of the portrayals of lawyers on TV and in movies that everything is going to be, you can't handle the truth. And while that is life for some lawyers, I would say that is more the minority of lawyers than the majority. A lot of it is going to be kind of sitting quietly with yourself and thinking and reading and writing. Also, you will find yourself in the position oftentimes to be kind of regulating what other people are doing or putting the stop on ideas that are getting away from the law. I tend to tell people, if you enjoy being a hall monitor in school, being a lawyer might be for you, because that is often a position that you will find yourself in. How do you decide if this is you, if a legal career is the right path? You're gonna have to put some work in. I mean, I can't tell you for you whether this is the right choice. My recommendation is spend some time talking to lawyers, spend some time shadowing lawyers. Think about what your goals are, what issues in the world you want to be a part of and you want to address, and then find people in those fields and talk to them about how they got to be in those positions. Don't be shy about that. This is not a time to hold back. And I will tell you, I have found that most people love talking about their own careers and how they got to where they are. So usually if they're getting an email, even if it's a cold email or a LinkedIn request that's just, hey, will you talk to me about this thing? I think you'll be surprised by how many people will respond to you, and it is absolutely worth the time on the front end to make sure this is going to make sense for you on the back end. You'll also find other resources out there to just give you a sense of what law school and a legal profession are like. Our Dean of Admissions, Dean Blazer, has a podcast called Admissible that I really recommend because she talks about these topics, right? What do lawyers do on a day-to-day basis? What is financing law school? What does that look like? A lot of the questions you may be having right now, she's addressing on her podcast. There are other deans of admissions in various law schools around the country who do similar things, have video blogs or podcasts. So take the time, watch videos on law school websites of what a law school class is going to be like, and think about whether that's something you want to commit 3 years of your life to. As I said, do the work now so that you're not regretting it on the back end. The other question I get asked a lot, and I think came up here already, is when do I go if I want to go? Should I take time after undergrad? To me, again, this is a question for you to ask yourself. A majority of the people that we admit to UVA law do have some work experience, but many of them come straight through from undergrad. To me, it's less a question of, just on paper, did you take that time? And more a question of what experiences have you amassed in your life that demonstrate that you're sure this is the path for you right now. And if you know that coming right out of undergrad, then by all means, go for it. But if you're not sure, take some time, right? Or try something else first and see if that's actually a better fit for you. And then if it's not, law school's not going anywhere. We're a pretty resilient industry. We will be here in a year, in 2 years, in 3 years. So take your time with it and don't apply until you're sure. The application process for law school has both quantitative and qualitative components. The quantitative components, first and foremost, because I know you're wondering, the standardized test. The primary standardized test for getting into law school is the LSAT. That is specific to law school, and I will tell you a majority of the applications that we receive do contain an LSAT score. We do also accept GREs and MPREs, or sorry, not MPREs, and GMATs. And so, you know, that's fine if that's what you want to do, but I do add a little asterisk there, which is when we are looking at standardized test scores, you know, it's there because it gives us not a definitive understanding of how well you're going to do in law school, but it gives us at least a bit of a sense of that, right? And the reason for that is because we have tons of data about LSATs. We can see trends in student success based on LSAT scores and things like that. And so providing us with an LSAT score gives us a sense of where you might fall in that spectrum. Again, we don't take this as the absolute truth by any means, but it does help us get a better sense versus a GRE, which is a little bit harder to calibrate. But that being said, there are lots of good reasons to take the GRE. The LSAT is not for everyone. If you are certain you're going to apply to dual degree programs, for example, the GRE is more likely to benefit you because you can probably use one score to apply for 2 schools. And we're certainly not going to penalize you for that. But if you're a great test taker, then having a great LSAT score might be an advantage to you. The other quantitative element is the GPA. We are looking at cumulative GPA, which will be calculated by the Law School Admissions Council. And that's going to look not only at your undergraduate degree GPA, but it's also going to look at all the various work you have done that contributed to that GPA. And so if you took community college classes when you were in high school because that was the way you got your Algebra 2 credits, or if you have study abroad grades, the Law School Admissions Council is going to calculate all of that into your cumulative GPA. And we'll be looking at that to look at, you know, that again, it's giving us a sense of how hard of a worker are you? How academically sound are you? Now we know, you know, not every GPA is created equal in terms of how the schools calibrate things, in terms of grade inflation. We factor all of that in. And so what I really want you to take away from me talking about the quantitative elements is I'm not going to tell you they don't matter. They do matter. They are indicators for us. But for us and for any school truly that's worth your time, they're looking at those qualitative elements. And those end up weighing as much, if not more, than the quantitative elements that present. And by qualitative, I mean the personal statement that you write, any optional addenda you include, right? If a school is asking, why do you want to go to UVA? And you tell us a really great reason why you go to UVA. That matters a lot. The resume that you present, the letters of recommendation that you have, and any other addenda that are included. Just to hit on letters of recommendation, because I know that tends to be a big question. You know, this is something you can control now. And so it's worth thinking about probably for any graduate program. If you're going to need letters of recommendation, now is the time to build those relationships with your faculty because you still can. Once you graduate from undergrad, you know, that it gets much harder. And so if you have faculty who you really hit it off with, or who are doing work that you are particularly interested in, don't be shy about talking to them about your goals, because we really can tell the difference when we're reading a letter of recommendation, whether that faculty member actually knows you or whether they kind of don't. And so now is the time to make sure they know you, they know who you are, and they are invested in your goals. The other thing I will say about letters of recommendation is when you are asking for one, I advise you to say something extremely blunt. Like, do you have any hesitation about recommending me for this type of program? And if that person expresses any hesitation at all, it's time to move on to a different recommender, because that can really tank a whole application. If a recommender is saying, you know, I'm not certain about this person's ability to contribute productively in a classroom environment, or this person failed to meet a number of deadlines, that's a pretty big red flag to us, because the vast majority of recommenders don't say anything negative at all. And so, that is something that you can control. There are going to be a lot of things in a grad school application process that you can't control. So, hone in on the things that you can control and make them as good as they can possibly be. In terms of other addenda that you might include, some people have experienced particular hardship through undergrad or issues related to their test taking, scores got messed up for various reasons. You had the flu that day. Something came up during one of your semesters of college that really affected that one semester of grades, but otherwise you did great. You can add those addenda at least for UVA, but just use your best judgment, because what you don't want to do is raise additional red flags for us, right? So telling me, well, my LSAT score is low because I really get upset every time I take a test. Okay, well, law school is a lot of high pressure test taking. So now you're making me question whether you're going to succeed in this type of environment. That's a very different addenda than, I was taking my remote LSAT and the building fire alarm went off and I had to leave the test for 10 minutes, right? That I can understand. So just thinking really about what you're telling us with those addenda goes a long way. Make sure you are paying attention to the application itself and any accompanying instructions for any graduate school you're applying to. I will speak for myself when I say we put a lot of time into crafting an application that's intended to elicit the information that we need to make a judgment. And so, when our personal statement contains a specific prompt and people send us an essay that isn't responsive to that prompt, you're missing an opportunity to give me the information that I need to make an assessment. And you're kind of showing me that you're not following instructions, which again is creating a negative impression. So this is another one of those things that you can control. Pay attention to the application and be as responsive as you can possibly be. Your application is your chance to tell us a story. Who are you? Why do you want to go into this field that you want, to law school in this case, or whatever graduate school you might be going into? What components of your life have led you here? What experiences have you had that make this a good fit for you? I want to close the application being excited to talk to this person, right? We interview everybody that we're considering for admission, and I want to get excited to talk to you. I want to feel like I need to know more. I want you to love what I love, which is UVA law, right? And so conveying that as much as you can through your application really does go a long way. In terms of the application timeline, as I said, the things you can control now are your GPA, do the best you can in your classes, your letters of recommendation, and then, what you're putting into your resume and work experience. I often get asked, do I have to have legal experience to go to law school? No, you don't. For some people, particularly people who don't have a lot of exposure to lawyers and their family or their friend circles or whatever, it may make some sense to get some of that exposure so that you can be sure. But that's for you. That's not for me. What I want to see in your resume and your work experience is evidence that you can take on responsibility, that you accomplish goals, that you have discipline, that you have some real world experience of some sort. And how you go about getting that is fully up to you. As long as it's getting you to a place of sound understanding that you want to go into a legal career. My one recommendation I have as far as the standardized tests, the earlier you can comfortably study and take it, the better. Multiple test scores are okay. If you don't get the LSAT score you want on the first try, don't get carried away. When we start to see 4, 5, 6 LSAT scores, that turns into a red flag. But if you start a little early, then you again are building in a cushion for if things don't go the way you hoped in that first go around. And finally, most law school applications are going to open in the early fall. UVA opens September 1st. And there is a bit of an advantage at a school like UVA that admits on a rolling basis. You know, the earlier you apply, the better, because that is the point at which we have the most flexibility in terms of who we are admitting. And so those applications that come in early get an extra look. We tend to be less busy at that time, so we can spend some more time with them. And ultimately, you know, I think the students who apply early do have an advantage. So I will stop there because I think there are probably questions.
Katie, thank you, and thank all our speakers. Let's go straight to the question part of the program, and I will recognize various scholars who have posted questions and let you ask the question yourself rather than my reading it out loud. So Mandy, why don't we start with you?
Hi, thank you all so much for speaking on this panel. I really enjoyed it. So I'm particularly interested in a master's in public administration. So I was wondering if there's anything we can do while we're still in undergrad to best position ourselves for that sort of degree. I know that it's usually requires some sort of work experience, not always. And then also to position yourself, you know, for a merit scholarship and those sorts of programs. If there's anything we can do now, just anything along those lines would be very helpful.
Absolutely. Thank you for the question, Mandy. I will just tell you a little bit about my experience. I think internships really helped me. It really helped me to see what I wanted to do. So I was already in my MPA program, and I did an internship at the University of Tennessee in the public service, what was it called? MTAS, Municipal Technical Advisory Service. And so I, was working with municipal professionals. So that led me into service in local government. So I think just those type of experiences, like if you have an idea that you want to be in local or state government, internships, and meeting with people, as the young lady from UVA said, it's very important, and it's really helpful to kind of meet with folks, city managers, or folks at the state level. They're public servants, so if you ask them for a meeting, generally you can have access to them, or at least, have a Zoom call or what have you. So I think doing things like that, and the things that I talked to you about, and certainly you can reach out to me after this. But merit scholarships, just what the young lady said from UVA, to do your best with your grades now, and make connections with your professors and folks that will give you good recommendations. So just position yourself in the best possible way.
Great, thank you. And Eddie, thank you for the question. Jacqueline.
Hello, I would like to thank all the panelists for sharing their time and experience today. My question is for Dr. Parekh. I was wondering if you could share some mistakes you or others have made, specifically as physicians trying to break into social change work, and conversely, what qualities you contribute to your accomplishment as the Surgeon General's Outstanding Service Award recipient. Thank you.
Thanks for that question. I think one of the things that's really important, being a physician and then also sort of having that background, but working in public services, is that it takes a team. And, it's just that the members who consist of that team are different. So when I was seeing patients, the team was, included a nurse and a social worker and a physical therapist and a community health worker. In public service, it was still sort of the team orientation, but the team was now a communicator and a lawyer and a business person and a public health official. And so I think that one of the lessons for success, both I saw in medicine as well as in public service, is, we're all going to sort of focus and get our individual degrees and specialize in particular areas, but that ability to work in a team, as a team, to achieve the results that you need are extremely different. And again, the members of that team might change and might be different. But I do think, sort of looking back, that those who've succeeded more than others, they're able to thrive in a team-based environment. They're able to recognize that the important qualities that each member of a team sort of brings to the table, as well as sort of their unique abilities, and that only helps the team. So less of a mistake in the sense that, but surely maybe others have made that, but more of sort of a tip to remember moving forward. And again, I think the work that we did, with the Surgeon General's office at that time, was really focused on reducing tobacco use and improving physical activity and increasing access to nutrition. It's really, sort of a thread in terms of a lot of these questions. Understanding sort of the big picture and being humble about the work as you proceed with it, and really, having a focus of how can I help someone, and how can I make a difference in other people's lives, and really having that drive, your interests as well as your decision making, I think will put you in good stead.
I think the question about mistakes made or things you didn't get right is an incredibly powerful one to ask, and a piece of advice for now or any time in your career. That's a classic interview question, and it's good to have something in mind so you're not sort of flat-footed when asked that, particularly not to do the turn that says the positive negative, right? My biggest mistake is that I'm too demanding of myself, or my biggest mistake is I'm too giving to others. That's a sheer giveaway that you have a problem seeing things that you didn't think you got right. Most of us will admit we learn more from our mistakes than our successes. We're much happier talking about our successes than our mistakes. But it's a good thing to practice for lots of reasons, including probably the quality of your soul. But as well for an interview, that's a kind of question you're going to get asked, and I'm not surprised that it came up here. Thank you, Doctor, for your thoughts on that. Drew, you have a question for Ms. Delsandro.
Yeah, as someone who's very interested in law school, but kind of coming at it now, realizing that I probably want to take some time off after undergrad, working before going to law school, I was curious, what are some effective public service jobs that I could kind of look at for that gap period between undergrad and law school that would help with sort of marketing myself on law school applications?
Yeah. So there are two kind of angles to this. I think, I don't know what your public service is, a big umbrella. So I don't know what your particular interest is, but I would say, if you are trying to refine that interest, if you are trying to understand if you want to take a legal approach to that interest, then get as close to it as you can, right? So if you are interested in immigrants' rights, right, go work at legal aid, work at a nonprofit that's going to be assisting, the type of population that you would be interested in potentially working with for the rest of your career. The other piece of this that I would advise you to do, and something I didn't get to mention earlier, is there is a significant emotional and mental toll to a legal career in public service. And so anything that is going to give you enough exposure to that to understand both whether that's going to be something you can tolerate, and to help you start to develop the self-care skills that it will take in a career of that sort, is going to be beneficial to you now. It doesn't have to be a strictly legal position. As I said, some of the applications we get are people who are working specifically in legal positions. Many of them are not. But to me, it's more about gaining substantive experience with the types of populations that you intend to work with in your career.
Isabella has a question that I suspect is on many people's minds, but you were good enough to put it in the chat. Do you want to?
Thank you. Are there any common characteristics you find among the strongest applicants? And is there anything that we can do to help set ourselves apart from other applicants to programs?
I'll say, in public service, we just want to see a dedication to public service. Or, there are a lot of folks that, are going into non-governmental organizations after they get an MPA or an MPP. So what is your commitment? How have you exhibited that? To the point of, what Ms. Delsandro, I think is your last name, but it's very similar to what she just shared about, you know, how get close to what you want to do and figure out ways to do that with public service. So that's what I'd say to that.
Thank you. Luke, you have a question that you said was for law and policy. I think it's actually a question that would be good for all three of our panelists. Why don't you pose it and I'll let them go down the line on it.
Yeah, so personally, I'm interested in a JD in MPA or MPP program. And I was wondering in applications, how do you suggest that we communicate career interests or subject area interests strongly, showing that we've researched these issues, while also not making it look like we've put blinders onto other issues or that we are lacking curiosity going into these programs?
Whoever wants to grab that one first.
I don't mind starting. So, at our application at UVA will, first and foremost, it'll give you an opportunity to indicate that just through a checkbox, right? We're tracking who's interested in dual degree programs. I would recommend using your personal statement to talk about your interests, particularly because just based on your question, I can tell you put a lot of thought into it. And so that's going to come through as you write out, using the personal statement to explain to us why you want to go to law school, why you want this dual degree, and what you care about. I'm not going to penalize you for not also caring about transactional real estate, right? That's okay. You don't have to care about that. As long as you're giving us a compelling reason so that we can understand why you do care about the things that you care about.
So I would also just say, what is your merit? What makes you unique? How do you care about those things? And how have you illustrated that you care? If you're talking about the environment, so how have you shown that you're interested in the environment? Have you volunteered? Did you go and take a job in the interim working in the sustainability office at a local city? Things of that nature. And I want to kind of get back to something I should have shared before. Like in the interim from undergrad to graduate school, oftentimes people will take jobs and they'll take jobs in an area of public service. And also you should consider for our programs, for some like local governments and states, and I think at the federal level too, that they have tuition reimbursement. That's one of the things that I think local governments do a good job of, having tuition reimbursement. So, some cities will pay $5,000, $10,000 a year for you to pursue your MPA degree or MPP or law degree even. So that's something to consider as well. So you can actually have a full-time job because, things that people don't often think, and I have a very local government kind of mindset, is that we need engineers, we need accountants, we need attorneys. I deal with lawyers. I was on the call with an attorney this morning at 9:00 before I came to be with you all. That has tracked in every place I've been. I've worked in the private sector for 20 years and local government for 20 years. So just remember that those are options as well, to go out and actually work and, have your employee help you pay for your degrees.
Yeah, I agree. And I'll just add that, I don't think those two are mutually exclusive. And I would go as far as saying that I think it's desirable that you're able to show both sort of unique interests, and that sort of distinguishes you and research expertise. You're willing and you're passionate about a particular issue. You're an expert in it. But at the same time, you understand sort of the bigger picture, the broader issues related to the field, issues that you may not focus your career on, but having that understanding is really valuable. So communicating both of those, I think, is, again, it's not mutually exclusive. And in fact, I think it's desirable for you to be able to showcase both.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thanks for that question. Milad, you have a question for Dr. Parekh.
Yes. Hi, Dr. Parekh. I'm Milad. As a pre-medicine student interested in health policy, I know a lot of great research also gets done in academic institutions and even sometimes in hospitals and in clinics. So what are the pros and cons in perhaps staying in academia to do this sort of work as opposed to going to more government-based centers in DC, Capitol Hill, et cetera?
Yeah, thanks for that question. And I know that the theme of today's seminar is public service, but certainly there are many ways you can serve the public, and it doesn't have to be sort of government. And so, when you think about health policy in academia, I would encourage you to think locally first, and within your academic health system, there are likely countless health policy researchers, whether it's in the public health school, public policy school, the medical school, and to really connect with the ones that you think align with your research interests, and try to get involved in health services research, health policy research. And also, sort of an academic setting, we'll have likely a large academic hospital and an academic health system. And so to the extent that you want to engage in policy work to improve the academic health system or improve the care that's being provided by that academic health center, you can get involved there as well. So I think that there are many ways, sort of staying within academia, that you can engage in health policy. You can sort of serve the public, not necessarily be in government at that time. But that's also the beauty of these careers. There are many, many people who have a career in academia and then, of course, go into government and public service and come back and go back and forth. So again, many, many pathways for success.
Thank you. Rebecca, you have a question that I have heard many people considering law school raise. So why don't you raise that for Ms. Delsandro?
Yes. Hi, I'm Rebecca. Thank you all so much again for taking the time to speak to us. This was really helpful. So again, my question's from Ms. Delsandro. How important is it to know the kind of law that you want to pursue before entering law school? So in other words, are there applicants who are more competitive in the application process when they make a specific case that they want to attend law school to pursue that certain field, which is backed by like their previous experiences and resumes?
The truth is, I think most people change their minds once they're in law school about what kind of law they want to do, or they find niches in the law that they didn't even know existed before they came to law school. And so we don't put a lot of stock in people having a very highly specific idea of what kind of lawyer they want to be. As I said, it's important to know that you want to be a lawyer. But people who, I like the sweet spot of people who know enough to understand why being a lawyer in general is their broad goal, but then are open to seeing how that plays out over the 3 years of law school. I think that's the sweet spot for applying.
Rebecca, I will tell you, in my experience, when students would tell me during first year orientation that they knew they were definitely going to be, some branch of the law, my stock response was, and maybe you will, but why don't you let law school happen to you and see what happens over the course of 3 years? And many of us, me very much included, have a story to tell about how we started with the general interest, and it took us in a path that was totally unpredictable at the beginning, but all kind of makes sense in retrospect. But you shouldn't even try to worry about coming up with yet, because you don't have the tools yet. Law school will give you those. I think that's true for graduate schools more generally. Charles, a question I think for any or all of the panelists with respect to the international aspect of some of the issues we've been talking about.
Yeah, thank you once again, everyone, for being here and offering your expertise. I know, Dr. Parekh, you had mentioned that you had spent some time abroad, that kind of shaped your perspective. And I was wondering if anyone had any other information about, for someone looking to engage in a public service career domestically, do you see what are some main benefits for pursuing a master's program or certificate or course abroad, anywhere in the world? What are some drawbacks, some benefits, how that might benefit a program here, public service career here, and what are some differences in the application process and pricing of that, and how might you navigate that as a student from the United States?
So I as it relates to what I've done in my career and what I see generally, I don't know that there's any advantage other than having the exposure as it relates to you personally and having that experience that you can bring into issues that you might confront, depending on as it relates to local government or I'll say government, kind of what you want to deal with. If there are federal connections you want to make, I think that certainly could be valuable having experiences abroad. But certainly, like, I've never seen it useful to be, like those experiences other than personally to be useful at the local government level. And maybe, I mean, there are niches in the state government that might be helpful as it relates to economic development and trying to find companies and bring them to this particular location, things of that nature that might be beneficial. Now, I'm now running an international non-governmental organization. So I travel all over the world because we have schools all in many countries. So I didn't have any international experience before, but I can tell you that now that I've gone to, different parts of the world, it's one of the best things that I've ever done. And I really appreciate these experiences and exposures to other cultures. So, I don't know. I think it's just, one of the things I also said, well, what makes you unique? And certainly having those experiences, I think, would make you unique. So I'll leave it with that.
Other panelists want to?
I think, echoing the point about perspective, the way that I have seen this play very well in a law school application is sometimes being abroad can give you a more profound appreciation for the rule of law domestically, right? And the way that our Constitution functions and the way that our regulatory system functions. That can be something that you gain by study abroad experiences. That's also, something I've seen really successfully conveyed by applicants whose parents might be recent immigrants to the country or who had to flee circumstances that were unsafe in other parts of the world. And so, that can be a very powerful message to convey in terms of why you want to pursue American law as your career.
Dr. Parekh, last thoughts on this one?
Yeah, no, I agree with my fellow co-panelists. I mean, do it if it makes sense for you, if you have interest there, less of, will it or won't it impact my sort of graduate school application. You never know when it can be helpful, but it's certainly all these experiences, can be unique and can be really valuable moving forward.
Lots of good thoughts, tips, wisdom shared during this panel. Thank all three of you for what you have done in the public sector and the educational sector and what you brought to bear on our program today. Thinking back over last night's program and then on through the last 90 minutes, one of the through lines that struck me, and this is designed to reduce anxiety. I hope that's what it will do. It's the insight of the great Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard, who said that life has to be lived forward and understood backward. It's very tempting to hear all this great wisdom today and last night and think, and therefore I have to do this and I have to do that. And you should be thinking about all those things and lining things up as best you can and thinking about how they position you the best they can. And then there will be the X factor. There will be the decision that you make and the roommate across the hall. There will be the professor because you didn't get into the section you wanted to, but you got into the other section you didn't want to, and that person changes your life. And there are I honestly don't know anyone who doesn't have at least one story like that, and most of us have many. I won't give you the details because there's neither time nor probably general interest, but what occupied about 20 years of my scholarly career comes from just like a story like that, an area I wasn't particularly aware of. It wasn't that I wasn't interested, I wasn't even aware of, and happenstance led me into it, and I found it to be an incredibly fulfilling way to engage in scholarship and advocacy and be involved in congressional testimony in a Supreme Court case in an area that if you'd asked me when I was at your phase thinking about applying to law school, wouldn't have even been on my radar. So live forward and understood backward. Make all the best decisions you can as you're making them, and then let it happen. And trust that on the other end of the process, there will have emerged a through line, but it won't be the through line that you could imagine today. Thank you all to our panelists for what you've contributed to this session and to making the Key into Public Service convening so impactful as it is every year.